Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The presentation that you're receiving in hard copy at the moment and that I'll work through is essentially the presentation that was provided to the LRT subcommittee. I've included two additional slides which the LRT subcommittee have seen on regular occasions, so we don't include them anymore, but would be helpful here, and they're up front in the slide deck. The presentation on May the 2nd was to provide the subcommittee and through the subcommittee to Council a project update. We are moving along a project schedule, and the update that we were providing in May was really around the LRT alignment. And we'll talk a little bit about the alignment and then what that drives in terms of our work plan. You'll see a schedule piece. We've shared this repeatedly with our subcommittee because they're keen to understand that this project continues to be on time in terms of its rollout. We are in an 8 to 9 year project phase, and as a project office, we've been in operation for about 8 months. So in terms of sometimes the answers to questions are we're not there yet. It's not that we're not thinking about those questions. We think of a whole slew of things that are related to this project. But really, when you look at an 8 to 9 year project and where we are at the moment, 8 months in, there are certain things that are underway and we're able to answer with some degree of certainty, and then other things that will follow. So as we look at the schedule here, the green bars are really some of the work that we're doing at the moment around completing, at your direction, the EA addendum. The announcement in May of 2015 changed the project scope. The announcement from the province received approval did not have elements that are now in the project around the pedestrian link, and also we had not done our full work around the maintenance and storage facility, so that will be included. This is an EA addendum. It's under the EA umbrella. Transit, of course, has its own environmental assessment process called Transit Project Assessment Process, or TPAP as it's often referred to. But we simply call it an EA addendum because we are updating many of the pieces of work that were already completed and approved in 2011-2012. The middle section of this graph really is where we start to dip into the procurement phase of this project. We are, in concert with our EA work, building the reference concept design, which will enter into the marketplace as a way of pre-qualifying some individuals that may be the consortiums that would be constructing this. From there, we would move to a shorter list and then ultimately get through to financial close in the middle part of 2018. Of course, when it comes to procurement, Metrolinx will be driving that process in partnership with Infrastructure Ontario, and our Memorandum of Agreement, which was approved earlier this year, lays out the roles and responsibilities that each party plays as we head into the procurement process. Most specifically, the City of Hamilton needs to be deeply involved in the development of the project-specific output specifications and the project agreement overall. In certain cases, we have full approval rights. In other cases, our information will be fully understood and incorporated wherever possible by Metrolinx into that final document. And then, of course, we enter into construction. And here's where it's a slight nuance. Construction theoretically could start after a financial close, and there could be, I suppose, some early works in late 2018. But we're very clear that on a project of this size and this scope, that major construction would not begin until 2019. There simply isn't a way a consortium that gets financial close midway through 2018 would be ready to hit the ground with major construction until about 8 months or so after that process is completed. So that is a high-level schedule of how we get from 2015 in the announcement through to 2024, which is the anticipated start of service date for our LRT project. The second piece that we talk about regularly is that we need to remember that our project is part of a global approach to both rapid transit and conventional transit here at the City of Hamilton. These are pieces that have been in the works for years and not something that's come along most recently. And here, of course, is the map of the rapid transit strategy, the so-called BLAST network, that sets out over the course of what I would call a generation the investments that need to be made around rapid transit. Of course, further filling in this system is the work that needs to take place through the 10-year transit strategy, looking at our conventional transit system that can link to a variety of rapid transit pieces along the way. The two early lines of the rapid transit strategy that we're seeing as where initial work should begin was obviously along the B line, one of our most heavily traveled route, and one that's always been identified, or recently been identified in our official plan as well as our transit planning as a good line for rapid transit. And then of course the A line is the other one that should swiftly follow in terms of if you're looking at sequencing. Some of the other lines are more projected to be part of that process over the next 25 years. So when we boil it down to the project, to which myself and colleagues both from the City of Hamilton and Metrolinx have been directed at your request to start to work on and move towards implementation, we then end up with looking at the B line and a small spur along the A line, the north spur of the LRT route down to the water's edge. The blue section on this map is, of course, the section that is a Phase 2 approach, unfunded at the moment, which would take us to Eastgate Square, the original eastern terminus point that we had contemplated in our LRT work in beginning around 2008 and moving forward to 2012. So what we're left with is the yellow route that you can see on the map as east to west from the Queenston Traffic Circle through to McMaster University, and a north spur that moves along James Street from James and King down to the waterfront. There are two asterisks on two of the stops on the north spur, and that is because, as per our Memorandum of Agreement, the province through Metrolinx has approved design work to get us right down to the water's edge, contingent upon that fitting within our billion-dollar funding envelope. The West Harbour GO Station is an absolute connection that will take place, so there's no asterisks on those stops, but there are a couple on those last two stops. The other little piece that's in black and goes to the green circle here, which is the GO Centre at Hunter, is the pedestrian link, which will provide a better pedestrian link from the center of our city through to the Hunter Street GO Station, where of course a lot of the GO Train, GO Bus, and some of our city buses are located as well. So today is really about giving you an alignment overview and telling you where we are in terms of some of the next steps. This is an overview of the alignment along the B line and the A line. Primarily, our B line is a center-running, segregated by curb barrier LRT. We are proposing 13 stops. When you're thinking about it from a rapid transit perspective, it's actually one or two stops more than exist along the B line express bus route that currently exists. We say the majority of the stops are 600 to 800 meters apart. There are some in our downtown core that are closer, and then there are a couple, one on the east and one on the west, that are larger than 800 meters apart. And we expect that through the public consultation process, that will be one of the areas of discussion. We're already hearing it from the community in terms of some of those stops being too far apart in the east, one in the east and one in the west. From an A-line perspective, there is a different running style to the LRT down the A-line on James. We are proposing that it be a shared running LRT. Truth be told, the entire north spur, if it gets to the water's edge at Guy Street and James, is only 2 kilometers long. And with stops along the way, the desire to keep up our running speed and to keep this as rapid transit is not as huge a factor when you're talking about such a short distance. And recognize, of course, that 2 kilometers is contingent on budget. It could be as short as 1 kilometer if the route only goes to the West Harbour GO Station. Shared running on James provides us with a direct link in the straightest route down to the water's edge and allows us to have those stops along that line, and allows us not to have the same type of construction process that the segregation may have occurred if we went down the A line as a segregated running. So I'm going to walk you through the sections from west to east, and then the north section as we get to the center of the city, just so you can understand some of the differences and nuances in the alignment as we move along the route. From McMaster to the 403, this remains unchanged from what you saw and went through the approval process in 2011 and 12 primarily. It's a center-running LRT with lanes of traffic in each direction on the side, in this case 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. We have protected the opportunity for bike lanes on the western route as well, from Macklin down to Coots Drive, and then linking in at Coots in some designed way to the larger bike network that takes us through further to the west end and into Dundas. But that's a proposed option. Whether that stays or goes at the end of the day will be part of the commentary that we receive back. As with both the east and western end, there's a terminal point. In this case, in the west, it's at McMaster University, where there will be transition to GO bus service as well as HSR connections. One piece that also hasn't changed in terms of a proposal from the earlier project is an LRT only bridge over the 403. This avoids the conflicts that could exist either on King or Main with the interchanges of the 403, and it was revealed in 2011 and 12 to be the preferred option for that very reason, and we've continued to believe that is the best option to keep up the running speed of LRT, and more importantly, not to have to go through a long protracted process of redesigning those two interchanges. So this is a visualization of what it would look like at McMaster University. So I said to the subcommittee, I'll give you all the caveats now, and then each picture you can just remember the caveats. These are conceptual drawings. They are taken from our technical drawings, so the scaling of it is appropriate. You can see the scaling of it. But the actual treatments are representative of what might be there. We have done no design work on stops, so in terms of what the shelters look like, we have not done that design work and be working with Metrolinx around that. The vehicles themselves are typical vehicles of an LRT design. Whether they look like this, we know for sure that they will have doors on both sides. So for instance, this is not necessarily the vehicle will be there. I don't know that we'll paint bike lanes green. It was a question that came to me from the public afterwards. We're just showing that so you can actually see the difference between that and the other roadway. But this allows you to see what we're talking about in terms of the center running LRT and then lanes of traffic. And in this case, because it's the McMaster stop, there you see the hospital and the McMaster buildings there. At this stop is where U-turns would take place. One of the realities of our center running LRT system is that cross traffic is controlled to various intersections along the way. So it results in something we call right in, right out. At certain roads, if you wanted to get to something on the other side of the road, you would have to turn right out of the road, move to an intersection where U-turns are permitted, and there will be a signalized U-turn opportunity to move to either the north side or the south side, depending on which way you're driving. Once we get across the 403, the LRT would transition onto King Street. And between the 403 and the downtown, it is primarily center running with the LRT. There are some components in the downtown core that pull the LRT to one side of the street or the other side of the street and stop having the one lane in each direction simply because of a space constraint as we make our way through the downtown core. Because it is a center running LRT with one lane of traffic in each direction, King Street would become a two-way road. This would continue through the entire route of King Street. Loading, stopping, and parking impacts are evident. You can understand that from the first 2 points, and so that is why we're working through, and will be working through as part of our program, how we handle the loading, parking impacts, and how we operationalize the inability for there to be just stopping along this route, as some are accustomed to do, even if it's illegal at the moment. In terms of the downtown core, the connection to the A-line spur would take place at King and James and link into our McNabb Street bus terminal. The A-line spur is a separate line. So you would have to disembark from the B line, the east-west line, and actually get onto a different train to go north. Through the International Village, from John to Wellington Street, our proposal is that one eastbound lane of traffic is still provided. There was some talk at one stage about fully pedestrianizing International Village and having the LRT move through a pedestrianized area. But in terms of allowing access to driveways on the south side, it was felt that a stronger solution, quite frankly, was to allow an eastbound lane of traffic. A couple of pictures to show how the downtown core looks. Here you see the need to pull the LRT stop to the south, and you can see the two tracks here, and there is a lane of traffic here that would be moving westbound only. In this case, we're actually proposing that the stop be integrated into Gore Park. It wouldn't take land away from Gore Park, but it would be integrated in a way that passengers would be getting off and actually being able to enter right into our Gore Park as a bit of a signature stop. I want to address the segregation by curb. So there is a curb segregation of the LRT. We are talking about no more than a sidewalk lip. So what you would step up to in terms of a sidewalk. And it is to prevent cars and discourage cars from turning left across the tracks where not permitted, and also from driving straight across the road. When you get into the East End, for instance, taking, let's say, Cameron and going from Cameron South to Cameron North and traveling right across the road, it is to discourage that. It is not a walled barrier. It's easy to actually step across if you needed to, and for certain vehicles, easy to mount and allow access to the right-of-way. One of the concerns that's been raised is with one lane of traffic in either direction, what about emergency vehicles? And the solution to that is that emergency vehicles would actually mount the curb, go over the curb, and actually be into the LRT right-of-way in order to allow them to move swiftly to where they would need to go should they need to travel along some of these routes. So the engineering of that curb would be such that it would be easily mountable by those that should be on occasion getting into the right-of-way. Could also be a maintenance piece that needs to happen on the track or the LRT right-of-way, but it's not designed to be traveled by traffic or pedestrians or bikes, but not also a wall that cuts off the rest of the community. Here's a picture of what might transpire in International Village. And so here you see the LRT shifting towards the north and allowing that eastbound lane of traffic on the south side, or to allow access to the south side properties. You can also see here the overhead catenary system. These are electrically powered vehicles through an overhead catenary system, for the most part off side poles. And then in the west end, it'll actually be a center pole, because out on Main West, we actually have a much larger right-of-way. So the A-line spur is, as I mentioned, a different running style from the B-line, not segregated from traffic in that curbed way. And so the rails and the line that the light rail vehicles travel along will be shared with traffic as well. Some people call this similar to a streetcar, but it's important to note it's the same vehicle. So it's not a different type of vehicle. It's not those raised streetcars that we're used to at one time in Hamilton, or you do see in Toronto on occasion. These are the same vehicles that would travel around the B line as well. So here is a depiction of what that might look like along James. This is actually James and Cannon. And you can see the light rail vehicle here moving towards King Street. And as you can see in this side, the cars that are moving northbound are actually driving on the tracks, and cars that would be traveling through the intersection, it's a red light so they're not, but if they're traveling once it turns green, would be driving behind the light rail vehicle. The stops would be integrated into parking bays at Cannon, and so that is the only loss of on-street parking, is just a few spots where the actual stop is to allow people to get on and off. So you can see from these vehicles here, they're actually, they move in both directions. They don't have to turn around on any type of a platform. So the driver cars are actually on either end. So in this case, it's empty here because the driver's on the other side, and then can switch around when we go the other directions. Crossovers allow the trains to move onto the other tracks, so that when they're traveling east-west or north-south, they're traveling with traffic and never traveling against traffic, which can be disconcerting to drivers, bikes, and pedestrians. From Wellington to the Queenston Traffic Circle, we move back to a center-running LRT, one lane of traffic in each direction. There are connections to some important destinations along the way, and as I say, for the most part, the stops are 600 to 800 meters apart. There is a wider section between Scott Park and Ottawa, which is where you get a little longer than that. It's just over a kilometer. Again, the end-of-line terminal at Queenston Traffic Circle will have connections to the HSR, so there will be bus bays there that allow for that seamless connection between LRT and our bus system. And it really does become the new transfer hub for East Hamilton and Stoney Creek, because we're not making it all the way to Eastgate Square, where that transit hub exists today. So here's a depiction of what the LRT would look like in this section. This is actually Scott Park, so you see the rendering. The school board was kind enough to send us a rendering of the new high school, which is being built at Scott Park. This white building here is Jimmy Thompson Pool, which of course is the site where we're also adding on some 50,000 square foot recreation facility. And further to the north is Tim Hortons Field. In this case, you can see how the traffic travels in the same direction as the light rail vehicles, between the light rail and the sidewalk, and here you see the platform in the center of the road again. In terms of moving on and off the LRT, Pedestrians do have to stand on a platform that's in the middle of the road, but they cross to get on that platform at a signalized crossing, or in most cases, a signalized intersection. So you do not have to dodge traffic in order to get onto the platform and get onto the LRT. And because the platform's about double the height of a sidewalk, there are ramps on either end, so it's fully accessible. You come from the ground level, roll up a ramp, and then you're able to actually just roll onto the LRT. The vehicle does not have a fold-out ramp or anything of that nature. It actually lines up perfectly with the platform height, so that from an accessibility perspective, it becomes very easy to move on and off. We've shown you actually a couple of the pictures where they're center platforms, and in fact that's actually the minority of our platforms. Most are what we call split platforms, and they're called far side platforms to make it even more technical, so let me describe what that means. So if we take Kenilworth, for instance, if you're moving eastbound on the line towards the Queenston traffic circle and you want to get off at Kenilworth, the light rail vehicle will actually pull through the intersection and stop just beyond the light. The platform is in the middle of the road. Passengers will get off and walk towards the light and cross at the signalized intersection just like all other pedestrians would to cross the road. If you're going westbound, you would do the same thing. Pull through the intersection, stop, and then cross at the light as well. Why those split platforms are helpful is that it keeps up running time. Once people get on and off the LRT, which can be as quick as about 15 or 20 seconds, then the LRT is ready to go. Doesn't have to wait for the signal, doesn't have to wait for pedestrians crossing. It can start to move towards the next station. So the majority of our stops are planned to be that way. There are some cases where we have not done that. One is at Scott Park. One is the volume of traffic there from the high school perspective, and then on event day. We felt this was a good option. The same happens at McMaster University, as you've seen. But the piece I showed you on Cannon is an example where it is far-sighted. If you're moving northbound, you get off the other side of Cannon. If you're moving southbound, same deal. You go through Cannon and then get off the LRT. We have a variety of studies and pieces of work that are going on. Really important, and why it was important to give a project update on alignment, is alignment drives a lot of other things. Without alignment, we can't do detailed design. Without alignment, we can't do traffic modeling or ridership modeling and a whole bunch of other pieces. So this allows us to start a lot more of that technical work, which we're driving towards completion for our public information sessions that will take place beginning in September, and move through the EA addendum process between September and late January. We have a number of pieces of work to do around finalizing the maintenance and storage facility location, and then of course designing that to a level that can go out to the public for comment and consultation. There's a number of studies that have to be completed as part of this EA addendum process. I've given a couple of examples on this slide, but there are more. So those are some of those technical reports that have to be in. They have to be updated. We did them before, but this is a different project and has some elements that are new, so we need to make sure that we do that before. To help us with this work and augment our own team that has been developed under your direction, Metrolinx has procured a technical advisory team. AECOM is the overall leader of the technical advisor team, but they have a number of subs that are helping them on the technical aspects of this work. The other thing that our alignment does is it helps us finalize the property impact details. And although we have order of magnitude information on property, we'll complete this work as we head towards the summer and ensure that all property owners that may be impacted are contacted prior to the public meetings in September. There are some factors that could affect alignment. So I also get asked all the time, so this is it, eh? And the answer is no. This is the proposed alignment. There's a lot of work that's gone into this. Trevor tells me I think it's version 10 we're on right now in terms of the full design. And in some parts, I know it's more than 10 things that we've gone through in certain elements of our alignment. But there are things that can affect that. The very first one, of course, is cost. While we have high-level costs that say we're in the right ballpark, we have to do some more technical work and detailed work around cost, and then that could affect our alignment in certain ways. Stakeholder and community feedback is the piece we're heading into very shortly. That includes your input, and we've already had some of that. We had direction from our subcommittee that when that report is approved here and ratified at Council, we will be working with the International Village BIA to look at what alternatives exist for the stop location in International Village. Currently, it's at the very eastern end, western end of the International Village, and it was felt that there should be some conversation about where that could be better located from an International Village perspective. There are 4 stops in our downtown core, one at King and James, and then one, of course, in International Village from a east-west perspective, and then there'll be a connection point to the A-line at the King and James interchange, and then, of course, one at Cannon, which is really the downtown core. But actually, if you take the downtown CIP area, you actually include the Queen Street stop as well. So, you know, several in our downtown. We have design work to do that could affect our alignment. Of course, as we get a lot more detailed, we'll know a lot more about whether our alignment has to be tweaked this way or that. And then finally, we have engineering and utility impacts. As the technical advisor actually gets very detailed and bores and sends cameras into our underground utilities, both our third-party utilities as well as the city utilities, we may have to affect alignment based on what we find under the ground and actually what we need to do to relocate or not relocate some of those utilities. In terms of next steps, we are doing a fair bit of engagement at the moment. Our schedules are fairly full, going to a number of people who have requested visits. Those include some community meetings, as was mentioned by our Deputy Mayor, as well as a number of stakeholders that have asked for us to come and share where we are with the project. We also will be beginning, I think it's at the end of May, the last week of May and into June, our corridor outreach strategy. We're just in the final strokes of hiring the community connectors who will be undertaking this work. We already have David Derbyshire on board as the supervisor of that work, and so we will be starting that one-on-one visitation with every property owner along the corridor, whether it's a business or a private residence. There will be that outreach. In certain cases where there's institutions, they will be captured in our other engagement strategies. David's team, for instance, won't be going to McMaster University or the hospital. We have a separate strategy for that as well. And then, of course, we have our environmental assessment addendum. There is a subcommittee meeting that's been rejigged to be at the very tail end of July, where we'll be presenting some information prior to going to the environmental assessment meetings in September, which kick off our public consultation on the EA. So that concludes the presentation. As I say, a redux of the presentation that was provided to the subcommittee, but gives us an understanding of where we are. And really, it's important that this alignment information is out so we can drive the other conversations and start to actually get to those solutions that we'll need to build on a number of fronts. So happy to take some questions on this presentation at this point. And then I know you've got our latest report from the subcommittee too, so happy to answer any questions in addition to this that were part of our last LRT subcommittee meeting.